In the Imago Dei, we have far more in common with each other than we think.
Something bugging you? Come on in. Let's go for a drive. Mr. Greg Katz, thanks for joining me, and Roscoe, which is my bug.
Oh, well,
Met him as Roscoe?
no, but
Roscoe, meet Greg. Greg.
good to meet you, Roscoe. You're a good old boy.
So, Greg, you've been here this week talking to our students about worship, since you are a worship leader and executive pastor in Sparks, Nevada at Livingstone's Church.
Indeed.
And then towards the end of the week, you've been talking to our students about missional living, which I brought you in specifically for that, just because of the way that I see you and your family living so missionally. So related to that, here's something that's bugging me just in our culture and even in evangelism, like even in Christian circles. And it's basically seeing individuals in categories.
Oh.
So, the church has a tendency to say, okay, this people group, and narrowly, defining a people group, even in the United States, basically based on stereotypes of a particular nationality or skin color or socioeconomic group or whatever else.
Yeah.
Which I think is buying into the lie that culture is promoting and causing such divisiveness.
Yeah.
Here you are, right? Almost middle-aged, you're still young. Middle-aged, white, Christian, that means you are Republican. That means you are anti-gay. That means you are pro-life. That means you are all of these stereotypes, boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
that are placed upon you when someone finds out you're a Christian.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love the way that you both challenge stereotypes and you do not see people through a stereotype. Maybe you could just speak at that.
Yeah. What's funny is, so working in Nevada, outside of the church companies I've worked with, we kind of fall under a lot of the California laws, and the more laws we see protecting people groups, right? Like technically I'm in a protected class because I'm over 40 years old. If you make any kind of statement towards me that has to do with my age, then you are attacking me, and I could actually sue you if that's done in a corporate environment, because you made an age-related statement. So I'm
Okay.
a protected
So
class
you're like-
based on my age.
Okay, interesting.
And the more we add these protected classes, whether it be based on gender or race or age or any other factor, the more we see people grouping people into these exact same categories. That,
Oftentimes even pretty arbitrary.
yeah, completely
category.
arbitrary. Like, so
What can we come
being
up
a
with?
40-year-old man, I have everything in common with every other 40-year-old man. That doesn't make any sense. So yeah, we have these conversations. We talk about what it means to love people, and at the same time, we're unlovingly putting people into categories and assuming we know everything about them based on a few select factors, which is common, which we do as people. We are going to make some presuppositions about a person. That's kind of the difference between racism and prejudice. I'm going to have prejudice toward anybody I meet. It's as hard as I try not to, based on the way you dress, based on maybe a little bit on your age, based maybe a little bit on your gender. I'm going to have some prejudice towards you. I'm going to have some presupposition. But when that comes, I think what we've done now is done the same thing for gender, religion, all of those things. We've put them in the same category we would say racists are. Like you automatically don't want to listen to my voice because I'm a white male Christian, and just so your presuppositions, and some of that's fair. There's been some hateful things said to people, but as Christians, if we're trying to love as God has taught us to love, if Jesus said the greatest commandment is love God, and the second like it being love others, how do we do that in a way that transcends all of those issues? Like, how do I love somebody who is a different gender, a different age, a different religion, a different gender identity, if you want to go on that route, or sexual orientation, and the harder we try to love each other through that, the more we end up screaming past each other because we're making so many assumptions based on the group that we've put you in.
Yeah. So in what way do you think, you mentioned we can't help but see people in a particular light. Is that all bad, or are there some good things involved in that?
Yeah, definitely not all bad.
Okay.
Well, I mean, because here's the thing, like, I dress in a particular way to say a particular thing about myself. So that is one way that, regardless of age, race, or gender, we project an identity we want by the way we dress. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. I can assume the guy wearing the Megadeth t-shirt likes heavy metal.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing.
Uh-huh.
I can assume the 15-year-old girl wearing a anime t-shirt is into anime culture and everything that comes with that. But then when I start then assuming that, okay, because they're into that anime culture, they're probably also gender fluid, or they love all things Asian culture, or they are probably emo and depressed, because that's the stereotype. That's when I started making assumptions that may not be true.
Okay.
And that's when I start alienating and having conversations that may not, instead of asking questions. That's the biggest thing, I think.
That's what I wanted to ask you next. So how do we combat this? Because that seems like actually a daunting task, to be able to change culture so that nobody is making these inappropriate assumptions about other people.
I don't know if have you watched Ted Lasso?
No.
Oh, you should. It's a great show. One of the best scenes from Ted Lasso is he's in a pub throwing darts, and he basically brings up this idea of how people have always labeled him and assumed, but because of the way he presented himself, they presume so many things about him. And he kind of makes this statement, is like, people aren't curious. No one ever asked him questions. And so he was in the midst of a dart competition, and he's like, for instance, if you'd been curious, hey Ted, have you ever played darts before? I would have told you, well, yes, I have. Every Sunday from the time I was for 7 years straight with his dad, he played darts, and he ends up beating this guy in a game of darts because this guy assumed this other gentleman knew nothing about darts. So yeah, we don't ask enough questions. We don't ask questions, we assume things and then attack one another immediately. Instead of assuming, we were talking earlier about how it bugs me when I'll see somebody either say, speaking for this particular group, or they'll say the opposite, I'm not speaking for all of these people. And it's like, well, first of all, why would I have ever assumed because you're a 42-year-old black male that you speak for every black person in the United States? That's an insane proposition. And then when you say, I'm not speaking, or you say, I do speak for, what? That's insanity. That's insanity. Unless I say, I could say I speak for my family, but I wouldn't even do that. There's 10 people in my family. I don't speak for all 10 people in my family. I wouldn't even go so far as to say I speak for my wife. I could say, I believe this is what my wife would say, but I don't even do that. So how we've gotten to this thing where we say, all right, this is a 30-year-old Latino woman, maybe that's properly said, Latina woman. So when she makes a statement about a political ideology, that is what every Latina woman thinks. And now I'm grouping a whole continent, or 2 continents, or 3 if we're going to say Spain. So now I've said, if you're from Spain, any South American country, or Central American company, or as we like to do in America, mistake indigenous Americans for Hispanic or Latina, you've made this preposterous statement that makes no sense. And you have people that have grown up in so many, like even in Latin America, we see a vast difference in society, culture, religion. So yeah, what we do is we end up not being able to have conversations with each other based on you and me in a room. And of course, the social media makes it worse because we can hop onto a thread in Twitter, or X as it's called now, and say whatever we want, assume whatever we want about people based on maybe even nothing, but or their profile or who they're friends with, and we start grouping people instead of we don't talk to each other, we talk to ideologies and we talk to ideas.
Right. I love the curiosity. What if we were just simply curious instead of putting people in these particular boxes? Could you help us just get practical with that when it comes to Christian missional living, to evangelism, being the church, showing the gospel? Relate that to curiosity in this kind of way, to get practical here as we wrap up.
I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and I've always known he's kind of spiritual, and that's what he would describe himself, but we actually had a good conversation. He's getting older, he's having some health issues, and he said, I've always been spiritual, but I'm not religious. And instead of just, I could make an assumption. I can make so many assumptions. I can assume, okay, maybe he's spiritual. He likes astrology, or I can make so many. But instead, I ask questions. Like, all right, what do you mean? What do you mean when you say you're spiritual? And then we start giving a good conversation about how he had grown up Catholic, like full on Northeastern United States Catholic school experience, because he's older than I am by a good bit. Experienced the violence of Catholic nuns, experienced some of the abuse, if not directly, but indirectly, of priests in the northeast United States. Not that it's just there, but so instead of assuming by spiritual he means some kind of pagan, I like to burn incense and chant things. Really, it's no. He does believe in the existence of a God, but he has experienced the human error in religion to one of its more brutal extents.
Yeah. And
therefore has been wounded. So his experience of religion is based on his own trauma. And so it was a great opportunity for us to talk about, the church is full of human beings, and until God comes again to save us from ourselves, it will continue to be that way. And we can't, just like I cannot judge the LGBTQ community based on the vocal few, I would hope that my LGBTQ friends would also not judge me on the vocal few, what I would consider militant Christians.
Well, this is something where I see you actually doing really well by breaking the stereotypes and breaking the assumptions. By you being curious towards the other, actually opens up relationships and dialogues. Like it seems like that the way that you do it, just because you're curious.
It's because we're curious, because we're not afraid to ask questions, like not even being afraid to offend people. It's like if you meet somebody with a physical disability, you can either sit there and have a conversation as if that person doesn't have a physical disability, or you can be curious. Hey, you're a human being. You're in a wheelchair. Like, hey man, like if you don't mind me asking me, what happened? Is this something did you experience an accident in life? Did you have a physical disease that caused this? Were you born because people want to share their story.
Sure.
And so not being afraid to offend somebody, and if you do, be quick to apologize and let's start over. But if I meet somebody who is presenting themselves by the way they dress, the color of their hair, their general attitude, and I make an assumption that they're in a certain demographic or community, it's okay to be curious, to ask a question and laugh about our differences, and then have a serious conversation. Because and I use comedy all the time. I like to joke about things that maybe aren't lighthearted, but be lighthearted about them, so that it's disarming in most of the time.
Yeah.
Not every time, but most of the time we're disarming. Now we're just two people living in the same world, living under the same sun, wanting the same things in life. We want to be loved. We want to have a roof over our head. We want to be fed. We want to see. We want to be seen. We want to be acknowledged. Now we're just two people having a conversation, and we've disarmed one another. And so you don't have to go straight for conflict. You can laugh about each other's differences, and then start finding common ground. Because at the end of the day, we have far more in common than we with anybody, with any image bearer of God. In the Imago Dei, we have far more in common with each other than we think. And obviously we see this within Christendom itself. We argue as Christians, which is ridiculous that we would have the kind of escalated arguments. Not that we can't have disagreements, but then when we take that outside of Christianity and the arguments that we have with the world, we got to start from a place where, no, we have far more in common. That is our biblical worldview. We are created in the same image of God. So we are coming to and coming from the same place. So let's start there, and then work through our differences.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Greg, thanks for getting us thinking in the right direction on this, to not just straight up categorize people, rather to be curious to see the individual as an image bearer of God. Start there.
Yep.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. It was fun.
Anytime.